Now we've talked about how to set the board, how the point values of the pieces. Now we're actually going to get into the nitty-gritty of how the pieces move. Alright, so first up, we have the rook. See how the rook has these cuts in their hat here? The funny thing is that the pieces pretty much tell you how they move if you actually look at the pieces. So the rook, with the cut in its hat here, can move horizontally, actually no, can move vertically here, or horizontally, like so. If there's a piece in front of it, it can only move as far as that piece. Make sense? Great. If we want to capture a piece with our rook, we simply go to the square that the piece is occupied, and then now that is our piece. Next we have the knight. Looks like a horse. If we turn the knight upside down, see how it looks like an L shape? That tells you how it moves. So we take our knight on B1. The knight goes 1, 2, and then over 1. It always moves in that 3 space L shape. It can also move 2 squares and then to the left. But knights really always want to be in the center. They like to be in the center, and we'll show you why. So if we have our knight into the center, we can look and see with our stars that the knights, when they're in the center, they can attack every square that has a star on it, or in this case, the extra queen. See that giant circle that the knight can possibly move to? So it can move to B2, it can move to A4, it can move to B5, it can move to D5, it can move to E4, and E2, even D1, and B1. So when they're in the center of the board, they have much more area to attack other pieces. So they're happiest in the center. Let's keep them happy. Alright? Next, we have the bishop, like so. Real piece, the bishop. See that cut in his hat? It's kind of distinct, right? It tells you how it moves. So if we remove the pawn in front, and you may have noticed that we have a dark square bishop and a light square bishop. So the light squares move diagonally on light squares. We can use our stars and we can spot the diagonal line that the bishop can pursue. Same thing with our dark square bishop. Our dark square bishop can only move diagonally on the light squares, like so. Boom, 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 boom. So that's D2, E3, F4, G5, H6. Next, we have the queen. Queen looks like this. See the spikes in its hat? Very distinctive. Same thing on our regular piece. See the cuts and sat around the top? Again, it tells you how it moves. So the queen can go in any direction on any color square in its line of sight. So the queen can go up like so. It can go diagonally. It can go 1 square, it can go 2 squares. The only thing that the queen cannot do is that it cannot jump over other pieces. The knight, just like a real horse, is the only piece that can jump over other pieces. Fantastic. Next, we have the king. King looks like this. King looks like this. So, since the king is so valuable, he's played in gold, okay? He can only move 1 square at a time because he's so heavy. So we have our king in our starting position. He can move in any direction that he so chooses. So he can go to this square. Next turn, our opponent gets to move up a piece. And then the king can move another square. So again, the king can only move 1 square at a time in any direction that it so chooses. Okay? Fantastic. Next, we've forgot about the handy dandy pawn. The pawn, one of the most valuable pieces, but has a lowest point value. So the pawn can move 1 square or 2 squares to start. Once it's moved 1 square or 2 squares to start, it can only move 1 square afterwards. Okay? So, if it's here, then the pawn can only move 1 square the following turn. If it wishes to attack other pieces, it can only attack the pieces diagonal of each other. So it can only attack this pawn on b4 or this pawn on d4. It cannot attack the c4 square. If a pawn is in front of another pawn, that pawn is barricaded. It cannot move until we can get rid of that pawn in the center, or our opponent gives us the opportunity to attack pieces on the diagonal squares of the pawn. So there's something called pawn promotion. Pawn promotion means that if we can get our king all the way to the other side of the board safely, like so, all the way up to the top, that pawn now turns into another queen, or a bishop, a queen, or a rook if we wish, or a knight. It cannot turn into a king. That's called pawn promotion. You work, you get your pawns on the other side of the board, you get rewarded, you get another piece back. You can have up to 9 queens on the board at the same time, but that's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible to actually do that. But it's a very powerful tactic. Usually, the first person who gets their pawn promoted wins the game. Alright? Fantastic. Next, we're going to talk about the 13 chess rules of why STEM in chess. These fundamental chess rules will turn you into a master chess player and prepare you to be a master STEM professional. Tune in for next time. See you later. Hey, like and subscribe on the video, please. It helps a lot.